If you're new to Madrona Labs synthesizers or patchable instruments in general, you might be a bit puzzled at first by the various parts of the interface. Even if you're familiar with patching hardware, things around here might look a little unfamiliar. So this video is a general field guide to give you a tour of the various common elements of a Madrona Labs synthesizer to aid you in your patching journey. We'll be using Sumu to demonstrate because it is our newest plugin and contains some UI innovations that haven't made their way to the others yet. So if you see differences between what I'm showing and Alto, Kaivo, and Verta, that's why. Consider Sumu a preview of how those plugins will work in version 2. My name is Cam, by the way. I'll be your tour guide. There's a lot to see, so let's get going. Every Madrona Labs plugin is designed so you can see the whole instrument at once. Modules are functional blocks that are divided by vertical lines. You can think of them in two sections, upper and lower. Between them is the patcher. This is where you build your patch. At the very top, you can find the header, where you load and save patches, view your license, version, and other global settings. The entire interface can be fluidly resized by clicking and dragging the bottom right corner. As a general theme, the upper modules create control signals. Things like envelopes, LFOs, and sequencers live here. And the lower section houses sound generators and shapers. This is where you'll find oscillators, dynamic gates, and other effects. The lower modules are chained together from left to right, so signal will flow between them without any patch cords. This is often indicated by small arrows or dials along the vertical lines. Where there are small dials, there's attenuation, so make sure that you turn these up if you want signal to flow from one side to the other. And another theme, MIDI input is always found on the top left of the instrument, and the final output is always found on the bottom right. Resting on the edges of the patcher are various inputs and outputs. Outputs look like small circles that glow with color when active. Inputs look like miniature dials or triangular notches. The notched inputs are at a fixed level and are usually meant for triggers. The dial inputs are called attenuverters. They let you adjust the level of the incoming signal. We'll talk about them more later. Patch cords are what connect inputs and outputs. To build one, click from output to input, or from source to destination. This general layout is the same across the Madrona Labs suite. Upper modules create control signals, lower modules perform sound operations as a chain, and the patcher is the labyrinth connecting it all. Dials are a girl's best friend, and they're probably the most used part of the interface. A bright line inside a semicircular area shows the value of a dial. Next to that, we have the same value in numeric terms. This design was actually inspired by aviation equipment. The smaller dials, as we learned before, are called attenuverters. This name is a combination of their two abilities. They can attenuate and invert. The word attenuverter is not officially recognized by any dictionary, so please help change this by making an effort to use it in everyday conversation. Most attenuverters you'll find at Madrona Labs are bipolar, with 0 at noon. When the needle is pointing straight up, the attenuverter sends no signal. Turning it to the right sends more signal, just like any volume control. Turning left of center also sends more signal, but inverted. Unipolar attenuators are less common around here, but you'll see them where inverting the signal with an attenuverter doesn't really make sense. They work just like a normal volume control. Back to big dials. Notice how the needle and the numeric display remain static when signal modulation is applied. This is because they display the central value pre-modulation. If a needle is moving, that's coming from a MIDI control signal or a pop-up LFO. I'll get to those soon. Let's go over all the ways you can interact with dials, or at least the approved ways. Click inside the dials track to make the value jump instantly. Click and drag vertically on a corner or the numbers to adjust the value from the current position. Hold Shift while adjusting a dial to make finer adjustments. Hover over a dial and scroll with your mouse wheel or trackpad. Double-click or command-click to reset a dial to default. We don't recommend throwing food at dials, as they may snap at you. Especially watch out for these ones with little teeth. They'll snap to useful default positions called detents. Octaves on a pitch dial are a common example of this. You can always hold Shift to override these detents. And finally, we have pop-up LFOs. They appear when you click and hold or right-click on a dial. Inside the pop-up, you can choose the shape, rate, and amount. To turn it off, simply double-click the amount dial to reset it to 0. And that's everything to know about dials. You did it. The patcher is the center of every Madrona Labs instrument. As we saw before, building a patch is as simple as clicking and dragging from output to input. Chords will automatically color themselves depending on the source, and bend at right angles to keep themselves tidy. You can select a patch chord with a click, or many chords at once with a box selection. You'll notice these little handles appear on either end. Grab these to repatch it somewhere else, or let go when the X is visible to erase it. You can also erase chords by hitting backspace or delete on the keyboard. There are a huge number of possibilities of what your patcher can look like. About this many. So chances are, whatever patch you build hasn't been done before. Well, you made it to this part of the video, so the rest of the interface should easily make sense to you. Elements like sliders, menus, and toggles are completely intuitive. Rather than explain the obvious in detail, I want to conclude this guide with some advanced tips. You can click the intersections of patch chords to cycle through which one is selected. Hold Shift while adjusting a dial to make fine adjustments and to override detents. You already knew that, but I bet you didn't know that you can use the brackets on either side of a menu as next and previous buttons. You can also quickly flip through the list with the hover and scroll gesture. Just swipe if you're feeling indecisive. I'll be having the spectral melt. I also recommend scrolling on Sumu's time dial. You can play the partials like scratching a record. And finally, if you have a pop-up window open, you can adjust dials in the background by scrolling on those dials instead of clicking them. Congratulations, you just completed your training to use a Madrona Labs system. What you do with this knowledge is up to you. I recommend making something beautiful. That's what our next video is going to be about. Until then, my name is Cam. Bye-bye.